My friends, today we honor a giant among men. Today we honor the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King was a powerful figure of destiny, of courage, of sacrifice, and of vision. Few people in the long history of this nation can rival his accomplishment, his reason, or his selfless dedication to the cause of peace and social justice. Today we honor a wise teacher, an inspiring leader, and a true visionary. But to truly honor Dr. King, we must do more than say words of praise. We must learn his lessons and put his views into practice so that we may truly be free at last. Who was Dr. King? Many people will tell you of his wonderful qualities and his many accomplishments, but what makes him special to me, the truth many people don't want you to remember, is that Dr. King was a great activist, fighting for radical social change with radical methods. While other people talked about change, Dr. King used direct action to challenge the system. He welcomed it and used it wisely. In his famous letter from the Birmingham jail, Dr. King wrote that the purpose of action is to create a situation so crisis-packed that it will inevitably open the door to negotiation. Dr. King was also radical in beliefs about violence. He learned how to successfully fight hatred and violence with the unstoppable power of nonviolence. He once stopped an armed mob saying, "We are not advocating violence. We want to love our enemies. I want you to love our enemies. Be good to them. This is what we live by. We must meet hate with love." Dr. King knew that he very probably wouldn't survive the struggle that he led so well, but he said, "If I am stopped, the movement will not stop. If I am stopped, our work will not stop. For what we are doing is right. What we are doing is just, and God is with us." My friends, as we enter a new decade, it should be clear to all of us that there is an unfinished agenda, that we have miles to go before we reach the promised land. The men who rule this country today never learned the lessons of Dr. King. They never learned that nonviolence is the only way to peace and justice. Our nation continues to wage war upon its neighbors and upon itself. The powers that be rule over a racist society filled with hatred and ignorance. Our nation continues to be segregated along racial and economic lines. The powers that be make themselves richer by exploiting the poor. Our nation continues to allow children to go hungry and will not even house its own people. The time is now for people of all races and backgrounds to sound the trumpets of change. As Dr. King proclaimed, there comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. My friends, the time for this action is upon us. The enemies of justice want you to think of Dr. King as only a civil rights leader, but he had a much broader agent. He was a tireless crusader for the rights of the poor, for an end to the war in Vietnam long before it was popular to take that stand, and for the rights of workers everywhere. Many people find it convenient to forget that Martin was murdered while supporting a desperate strike on that tragic day in Memphis, Tennessee. He died while fighting for the rights of sanitation workers. Dr. King's dedication to the rights of the workers who were so often exploited by the forces of greed has profoundly touched my life and guided my struggle. During my first fast in 1968, Dr. King reminded me that our struggle was his struggle too. He sent me a telegram which said, "Our separate struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for humanity." I was profoundly moved that someone facing such a tremendous struggle himself would take the time to worry about a struggle taking place on the other side of the continent. Just as Dr. King was a disciple of Gandhi and Christ, we must now be Dr. King's disciples. Dr. King challenged us to work for a greater humanity. I only hope that we are worthy of this challenge. The United Farm Workers are dedicated to carrying on the dream of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. My friends, I would like to tell you about the struggle of the farm workers who are waging a desperate struggle for our rights, for our children's rights, and for our very lives. Many decades ago, the chemical industry promised the growers that pesticides would bring great wealth and bountiful harvests to the fields. Just recently, the experts are learning that farm workers and the truly organized farmers have known for years. The prestigious National Academy of Sciences recently concluded an exhaustive 5-year study which determined that pesticides do not improve profits and do not produce more crops. What then is the effect of pesticides? Pesticides have created a legacy of pain and misery and death for farm workers and consumers alike. The crop which poses the greatest danger and the focus of our struggle is the table grape crop. These pesticides soak the fields, drift with the wind, pollute the water, and are eaten by unwitting consumers. These poisons are designed to kill and pose a very real threat to consumer and farm workers alike. The fields are sprayed with pesticides like Captan, Parathion, Phosgene, methylbromide. These poisons cause cancer, DNA mutation, and horrible birth defects. The Central Valley of California is one of the wealthiest agricultural regions in the world. In its midst are clusters of children dying from cancer. The children live in communities surrounded by the grape fields that employ their parents. The children come into contact with the poisons when they play outside, when they drink the water, and when they hug their parents returning from the fields. And the children are dying.